Hey guys, we're very lucky today to have my instructor in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, one of my friends, mentors in life, Shihan Russ St. If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll hear me talk a lot about Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and Shihan Russ and how you've been just a huge influence in my life, in Tri-Tac. So I'm very, very excited to talk. It's something I've wanted to do for a while, to actually hang out with you, shooting shit about Jiu-Jitsu. No plan. Yeah. But let's just talk.
We talk about this stuff all the time. We just don't put it on video,
camera,
right?
So this is a cool opportunity. So for one question that I guess like to know, and I kind of know the answer, but let's bring it back.
Sure.
What is your philosophy on Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and why is it a little different than, let's say, we talked briefly about like classical Jiu-Jitsu compared to modern Jiu-Jitsu? Sure. And I'll let you. I'm not gonna preface that with anything. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think everybody that knows about Jiu-Jitsu in any of its forms really feels it's the most versatile martial art that there is. Because it embraces so much, right? You've got takedowns, and you've got throws, and you've got chokes, and you've got, attacking the joints, you have striking, you've got a resting technique. I mean, there's just so much to it because it's been around for so long. It's gone through multiple cultures, hundreds and hundreds of years of development. So it's such a phenomenal art, no matter what version of it that you practice. And I feel, my thoughts about it, having been doing this now for 45 years, and having seen a lot, is that all Jiu-Jitsu is Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, right? That's the root. That's where it came from.
And it's kind of funny. I got these conversations all the time with people on YouTube. Is like they think it's judo or BJJ first. I'm like, no, it's all started with Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and it really is. Like,
it started with Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and then there are other arts out there that don't even have Jiu-Jitsu in the name that are based off of Jiu-Jitsu, right? You wouldn't think that something like Krav Maga, right? It's an Israeli combat form, but if you go back and you look at Imi's training, right, he's got Jiu-Jitsu training in there.
Or like Hapkido, isn't Hapkido part like basically Taekwondo with Daito-Ryu combined?
Yes. So when you think of Aikido, Judo, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie or BJJ, there's, military combatives in the Army and in the Marine Corps, right?
Right.
All this stuff has roots in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. But because so much time has passed, right? Jiu-Jitsu left Japan kind of right around the turn of the 20th century, like right around 1900. And it went to Australia, it went to Europe, it went to America. A little bit later, maybe another 20 so years, it went to South America. And so then, it started not being necessarily thought of as just Japanese Jiu-Jitsu because each one of those cultures influenced it.
Sure, put their own little spin on it.
In some way, right? So I also think my philosophy is, with enough time in Jiu-Jitsu, you will realize it can be used for a lot of different things, right? It definitely can be used for self-defense. Its main original purpose, right? Even more than just self-defense.
About the way deeper than self-defense.
The way we think about
survival.
We think about self-defense as like you and me in our daily lives. Somebody holds us up at an ATM machine or some, but they were like a combat society, right? Clans fighting clans and that kind of stuff. So they were more like in the military realm.
Like this is for survival, not just for fitness or some drunk asshole on the street.
So that's where it started, right? But now today, you can use it as personal self-defense for sure. There's always a fitness component to it when you're doing something physical. Absolutely can be used as sport, right? One of the earliest versions of Jiu-Jitsu, just to keep it alive, was judo, right? So the guy, Jigoro Kano, who invented judo, was multiple rankings in Jiu-Jitsu styles. Right. So, but then he had to find a way to keep it alive, because at the end of the 1800s, when Europe was in Japan, they were just like, no, we can't do this samurai thing anymore. And the samurai were also going like, oh, guns. They really defeat swords, So there were groups that tried to preserve it in the old way. That still exists today. That's called Koryu Jiu-Jitsu, right? The ancient styles. And they're not really super focused on self-defense. They're very focused on preserving these ancient techniques.
History lesson,
like history. Yeah. And then there were Jiu-Jitsu styles that just kept going, just the way jiu-jitsu always had, right?
Right.
They did it for as long as it made sense in the way they were doing it, but now there were guns. So now we got to figure out, we're being held up in the street, and there are long arms, and like, so how do we...
the curriculum changes or adapts a little bit.
It adapts, right? Then it starts spreading around the world, and it mixes with other things that already exist, right? It mixed with arts that were happening in France, in England in particular, in Russia and the Baltic states. There were these indigenous arts that were there that Japanese had not been exposed to. So now they're saying like, oh, there are other people trained in grappling and striking arts out there. We've got to adapt. So there are styles that have just continued to adapt along the way. And I would say those are what I call like the viable Japanese jiu-jitsu styles that still exist.
Right.
Then of course, judo kind of really influenced sambo.
Sure, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I saw jokes like the Russians or something like they went and learned judo and they decided it wasn't gay enough, so they took off the pants or something like that. Or something like it was great. I probably fucked that quote up, but it was kind of funny. I was like, oh wow. Obviously, it was more than sambo than just that, but it was yeah.
And then of course, everybody knows if you've done any research. It went to South America. It went to Brazil because it was a gigantic Japanese settlement there, right? And so it went there. And judo is actually really prevalent in Brazil. There's a lot of like amazing judo dojos there. But then, the Gracie family kind of took what they learned, because they learned a specific style of Kosen judo, right? And so then they adapted it for their people needs, and their needs and their culture and all of that.
Okay, the thought or the background is like Hilaire was so much smaller than everybody else that he couldn't do the throws well, so he focused on the newaza.
There might be a little myth to that, I think, because I've actually trained at the Kosen dojo that Mitsuo Maeda came from, right? And Kosen judo is primarily on the ground, right? And there's a reason for that, and it's not a reason I think a lot of people know. So the school systems in Japan are not exactly the same as they are here in the US, right? The age groups are a little bit different. So they wanted to kind of create a style of judo that they could do in the school systems, kind of in the high school time frame. And there were no like awesome mats like we have now. It was all tatami back in the day. And tons of people were getting really hurt with all the big throws. So they kept a lot of the takedowns, which aren't like the big throws.
Sure.
They kept a couple of the throws in there, like the real basics, like the agoshi and the asotagiri and that kind of thing. But then they really developed the newaza portion of it. And as a matter of fact, they brought in some other jujitsu people that also specialized in groundwork.
Interesting.
And really grew that. So when
is guard a big part of Kosen judo, or is that
of course there's Japanese names for them, but most of the things like guard and mount and side mount and all those things all
kind of surprises me, and I kind of go offshoot here, but if you look at our charts, the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu charts, the Kobukai charts, I think you might have talked before, it almost seems to me as a blueprint or like a structure for like all jiu-jitsu is like in those charts. Like there is a ground, there is a guard, there's even leg locks in there. There's then there's the wrestling control and all that. So it's kind of fun. Like when you look at it, like our charts and other charts out there, like Daijuru and Danzo, a little similar, but not really. But you see like everything. It's almost like the blueprint for everything. And then now that someone's like, oh, I'm gonna specialize a little bit more, so they spend extra time on leg locks, or specialize a little bit more on the Murotagari, and they develop the double legs, or that type of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it kind of makes me smile sometimes. I'll just kind of be perusing around the web, and suddenly somebody's making like a huge deal about like Kanasuri recently. Like I would say even in the last year and a half, suddenly there were like Kanasuri, that's the I'm not sure what they
scissor
takedown, right? This is the best technique, whatever. Everybody needs to learn this. And I'm like, It's been around forever. So it just makes me smile, and I'm happy about it, right?
Yeah.
I almost see some of the arts that like maybe focused in just one area, kind of reaching back now into history and pulling some of the things forward and realizing that they're all valuable in one situation or another, right? So we've got that. BJJ from the Gracies basically started off as the self-defense curriculum. I mean, you can go back and look at all those videos of Hilaire. It's a self-defense curriculum. There's many techniques in that self-defense curriculum that we do too.
Right.
Only because we had similar roots way back there, right? So, but then of course, when it came to America, it really developed this other side of it, which is sort of that sportive side with grappling competitions and all that, right? So again, we're seeing jiu-jitsu in its versatility.
One thing that's cool too is like kind of back in the day for me, I was definitely a little more fight oriented. I really wanted, I loved combat. I loved, I wanted to compete. And it was fun that we competed up the blue belt with just Cobra guys. We did great in tournaments, and then and then I'd say things change a little bit when you go from the blue to brown or purple and in tournaments. But it's just I remember looking back and I'm like, wow, like we really was a very solid, complete system, that I think that we were exposed to. So
I think so too. And don't forget, like if you're talking about competitive BJJ, right? And probably up to about the brown belt level, like you're saying. I mean, that all came from somewhere. Right? It's just techniques that is it probably came from judo or jiu-jitsu, right? And then with time and with introduction to other arts, because a lot of the early Gracies and BJJ studied a lot of other things. They did catch wrestling and just basic like Greco-Roman wrestling and all kinds of other things. So it's continued to adapt. So there's another branch of jiu-jitsu adapting. Of course, the military picked it up.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, if you go back to the 1944 Second World War Combatives Manual, when the Army wanted to put that together, they already had a bunch of bayonet techniques, some real basic self-defense. But they went to Sashiro Okazaki and his group in Hawaii.
Oh, shit.
And Sig Kufarath and a bunch of these other guys that were there and said, help us develop this curriculum. And so, if you go through that manual, you'll recognize literally every single technique in there because it's pretty much all jiu-jitsu. The military went through ups and downs with kind of things that were popular. You start getting into the 60s, you see a lot of like Taekwondo and Kung Fu type things thrown into it. And then I would say probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, they actually kind of went back to the jiu-jitsu, but then also incorporated BJJ moves into that. So, it's versatile in a combatives space, although it has to be adapted. Obviously, you can't just roll around on the ground with people with guns and stuff. Police officers, often using stuff that we use in our Aikijitsu portion, right? A lot of these are arresting, restraining techniques, things where you control the arm, like the ikajo and wrist twists and, gyaku garamis and all of these things that help arrest and control people. So, I mean, when you say what's my philosophy of jiu-jitsu, it is that it is this incredibly broad, versatile art that can be used in many, many ways. What we need to stop doing, everybody, and I'm looking at you as I'm saying this, as jiu-jitsu people out there, whatever style that you're doing, is stop saying that one style is bad and the other style is good. Jiu-jitsu is versatile enough to fit a bunch of needs and niches of people,
Very smart,
right? And so if you're a competitive person, you're going to see jiu-jitsu in one way. If you're more for self-defense focused, you're going to see it in one way. If you're in the military, you're going to see it another way. If you're a police officer, you're going to see it another way. They're all right for that situation. Just because you couldn't take, let's just say, a police officer who uses the portion of jiu-jitsu very successfully, you can't just put him in a competitive grappling match when they don't have that training. The competitive grappler beats him, and then he says, your jiu-jitsu sucks. That's not a reality. There is no reality. When you take a self-defense person against a competitive person, you can have a very similar reaction, but then you can also flip the table, right? I can go out there and grapple with somebody that's done, say, BJJ for 20 years, and I'm going to have a hard time, right? And I've been doing it for a long time, so I mean, I'm going to hold my own, but I'm going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
It's going to be really difficult. But then I can also take that person, right? I'm going to stand them up and I'm going to put a gun against the back of their head, and they're going to have a hard time because maybe that's where they haven't focused.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with either one of those scenarios. We've just used jiu-jitsu in what is necessary for our niche and our current interest and that sort of thing. So the jiu-jitsu family needs to recognize all the versatility of jiu-jitsu and appreciate all of the niches it's being used in and why that's versatile, and stop like bad-mouthing each other.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of egos and all that bullshit involved. My art is better than your art. This thing is better than this thing. I think it's almost toxic. It ruins the relationship in martial arts. Not the relationship. It ruins the journey that you're almost always trying to compete against something, prove something to someone else, when it just should experience it and do it for your own. I think one of the things, let me back it up for that. One of the things that I am trying to do is I believe that, like you're saying, jiu-jitsu and martial arts is for everybody. It doesn't have to be, if you don't want to do sport, you don't have to do sport.
Right.
If you don't want to do self-defense, you don't have to, but like, there is some version of martial arts, jiu-jitsu, whatever, that fits everybody's body, needs, instincts, whatever.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with that person exploring that and taking it to their natural conclusion of that. You know,
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of the sport guys, because they see it in competition, because there's a medal involved, a trophy, that they think this is the best, this is the way it should be, all that other stuff is just bullshit, when it just almost annoys me. I'm like, no, you're just missing a big piece of that picture.
I think they're becoming champions in the portion of jiu-jitsu that they're doing. Right. And there's definitely something to be said. They earn those belts.
Sure.
They earn those medals. Just don't think that now I'm going to put you in, a situation where somebody's, got a knife against your throat from behind, and you're going to perform at the same level, because the person that does know how to defend against that couldn't perform at your level in the ring. So what you do is you look at each other and you really appreciate the expertise each other is developing in that branch of what you're doing. But at the same time, you train MMA guys who go into the ring, right? Super versatile in striking and grappling and takedowns and all of that. And what is the first thing you tell them they have to do?
Defend themselves first.
Defend themselves first.
Yeah.
Right?
Every single time.
You don't get a chance to do your techniques if you haven't defended yourself first.
Right.
So underlying every version of jiu-jitsu is always that line of self-defense. In whatever that arena is, that is always there.
It's funny, when I do my intros here, it's one of the first things I ever talk about is getting the stance and structure and then putting ourselves in a defensive position, because I don't care if you're sparring, I don't care if you want to be the next UFC champion, I don't care if you're competing. Defend yourself, space, awareness, and having a good mindset. That's going to allow you to actually win a situation. Whether it's like that gun being pointed at you, or just your buddy sparring it, that night. If you're stupid, cock, or like hands down, or like wild going at him, or you act like a little bitch and you're like scared, like you're just gonna, you can get taken advantage of. So like self-defense first has always been, it's my mantra, and I think that probably comes a lot from you too, but it just makes sense and it fits, and from, if you have a good self-defense, from there, you can then start bridging in these other skills.
Absolutely.
What is it you want to be.
And those arguments that are sort of like, hey, this MMA guy would kick that jiu-jitsu guy's ass, right?
Yep.
There's no reality to that. There's reality to the statement, but more than likely, unless either one of them is a complete dick, if I meet an MMA guy and he finds out a jiu-jitsu guy, what's actually going to happen is a beer.
Yeah,
it's probably a beer. We're going to hang out. We're going to talk shit like all night, and it's going to be freaking fantastic, right? It's not about the art. It's about that individual. Are you a decent human being, or are you a jerk? Right. I don't want to fight anybody. Will I defend myself? I absolutely will, but I don't want to fight people. I like people. I'd rather hang out and chat, and I think everybody needs to take on that attitude.
Yeah. I always say that everybody in the world in martial arts, I think the world would be in a nicer place,
Oh, yeah. We probably have like less war, less crime.
Yeah, fuck. Jesus, but that's going to never happen. There's too many egos involved in that. You actually said one thing I want to go back to is like, the sport guys, saying that, the comparison of sport and self-defense, but it's kind of funny. I talked to obviously we have a lot of jiu-jitsu focused people here, and some have never actually had a punch thrown at them in their life, never learned to defend them. Like they choose, like some of our classes, they just choose not to do the self-defense portion. Like there's combative classes and there's and there's sport classes, etc. And I was talking to one of our black belts today. He's like, I really think it's time for me to learn how to defend myself, like learn how to throw a punch or like defend against a punch. I'm like, it's kind of like, fuck, like you would think the number one skill every man should probably want to learn in the beginning is like
not how to get punched
in the face. Instead, we're learning how to butt scoot and pull guard and all that. Not here. We teach takedowns first, but
well, I mean, this is an unusual group, right? Because all of your instructors have been highly trained in multiple things.
Yeah, we're lucky.
Right?
That way.
So, like, I'll take yourself, Oz, Kenny, right? They'll go out there and teach BJJ because they are highly ranked in it. But they can turn right around and teach self-defense because they're highly ranked in it. Or they could go into karate or judo or what because they're highly ranked in it. You don't get that everywhere.
No, I know.
There's a lot of bullshit instructors that are out there, right? But when you find instructors that are truly actually trained, they can bridge all of those gaps very easily, and the students become much more well-rounded.
Yes, which is one of my main goals. I do want a well-rounded student. That they feel confident everywhere.
Yeah, and I do feel that self-defense is one thing. Right? Like every human probably needs to have a handful of tricks in their pockets, right?
I agree.
Cover your head, know how to not get hit, know how to escape grips.
Sure.
Maybe have to take someone down in a real basic way to be able to run away. Like everybody needs to know that.
Some basics.
Some basics. So no matter kind of what version of martial arts you're in, you really should know that. I think it's probably a small percentage of the population that take the time to do it, but I'd love to see, everybody get a chance to do that.
I saw some stat. It was like, I forget. It was like the stat of like how many people actually do martial arts in the world, and it was like less than 1% of the population.
Yeah.
And it's fucking, when you think about it that way, like, well, if I teach someone basic stuff, like you actually said last night, like, you'll defend against 75% of all attacks. I was like, it's actually probably 99%, because you think about 99% of people don't know how to fight, and then there's the 1% of the world that does martial arts, and how many of those martial arts is actually like teach you true combat, self-defense. So when you think about it, like,
it's a small group.
small group of people. Yeah, of course there's some big freaks out there who like to hit hard, but like
it is smaller than you think. I got an eye-opener when I went to Japan a few times. It's not easy to find like a jiu-jitsu school there.
Really?
Yeah, and you'd be like, that's where it started.
Everywhere in the corner, yeah.
Being in Japan, you can find judo and aikido everywhere, but trying to find like an actual jiu-jitsu dojo, it's very, very difficult. And you just wouldn't think that, but it just goes to point out, like, we're in the martial arts, so in our head, like, everybody does them, and then you really find out, like, very few people in the world do them. So yeah.
What is so from my correct collection now, you have Daitoru, what your Shihan and Daitoru or Danzan, or what's the, I hate asking the
it's more about roots. Right, so my ranks are from the schools I studied at.
Yeah,
but they have roots that go into multiple branches. Right, so we have a branch that came down through Daito Ryu, from Sokaku Takeda, and before that through Yoshida Kitaro, through Richard Kim, Duke Moore, Jerry Kunzman, like down to me, right? So they preserved whatever curriculum they had learned through there, but also have adapted it.
Okay.
It adapted pretty early. I think Yoshida Kitaro was one of the first people, and this is like a long time ago, was like, we're not doing this stuff on the knees anymore. Like, he had been in combat. And so he was just like, we're wasting our time doing that, right? Yeah, what is this? So he just doesn't do the Swariwaza and stuff anymore, and that kind of passed on that way to us. We have a couple of lines of jiu-jitsu through Kiyoshi Nake, through Shishiro Okazaki, that kind of came down through us, and then I've had my own experiences, right? Military combatives, stuff that we've kind of rolled in, and keeping with the philosophy that it needs to continue to adapt to whatever the potential attacker base is that's out there, right?
Right.
We've had to up the grappling game probably in the last, I'm going to say in the last maybe 20 years. We've had to up that more than what I learned in my original first school. I learned some more in my second school, and then...
So yeah, is Okita bullshit? We were making a joke off camera. It was a controversial topic, but I do want to. We were talking about something. I want to continue. So where I was going with a little bit of the background of Daitu-ryu and Danza-ryu and history is like, what caused you to, let's say, make the Kobukai charts different or adapted compared to, let's say, Zenbudo-ryu or
Great question.
Yeah, so what was that philosophy or that method? What happened there?
I think number one, I was young. And I was just into let's just crush each other all the time, and there were techniques from all of the various things that I learned that they were kind of weak. I felt like they were maybe like the leftovers from the stuff they really just tried to preserve historically.
Got it.
And to bring along, but the application was like just almost non-existent, or if there was a good application, it was like every time we did it, like some strong person could like get out of it or bend out of it, or somebody quick, I was like, there's a hole in there. Like there's something missing in that.
Sure.
So, a fellow black belt and friend of mine, Joe Carvalco, and I literally were just in my garage on a bunch of mats, and we were just going through everything we know. He had also studied other things.
Whatever happened to Joe? Have you talked to him again?
I mean, we trained together for years and years and years.
I haven't seen him.
He went on to doing some Aikijitsu training for a long time.
Okay.
And I think he had a couple of injuries and kind of backed off a little bit.
Got it.
But he trained with me for years. And we trained together for years and years. So we were just trying to make corrections, right? And seeing versions that other places did them, whether it came out of, judo or other jujitsu styles or ninjutsu or whatever was around.
Right.
Then there was stuff that were like, this is complete bullshit. We're not doing that at all. I call them sometimes my notebook techniques. I have them recorded. I know how to do them, but I'm not going to waste anybody's time for self-defense. And then we just tried to get down to a curriculum that was enough along the way so that it kind of made sense as you were learning it, right? You learned how to do this basic hip throw that's like the mother of all hip throws, so that when you moved on like from a nagoshi to a harai goshi, you're like, oh yeah, I get what's going on. So we spent a little bit of time doing that. And we had a curriculum for probably, 6 or 7 years before we started making changes. And those initial changes were just about how people learned. We were running into techniques, say at like blue belt level, where we were just like, oh man, if we had just taught him this first, then he'd get this like immediately, right? So we just kind of like move something around. And next thing you know, the students were getting it like that, right? So we're like, okay, that was the right choice. And then, like I said, a little bit of increase in Newaza techniques. Some from judo, from people like Walt Miller. He had some instructors that we also got to train with. I was in Japan at the Kosen Judo Dojo. I did do some training with a couple of Gracies at seminars, and did some training with Hickson out of his place, and just to try to understand like that philosophy, that mechanical philosophy. There was never a time where I went any of these places and they did a technique and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen that technique before, because I knew the technique, but maybe how they got into it, or how they responded to somebody else, or how they did a reversal that flowed right into something like an elevator into a kata hajime from mount or something. And I was like, that's a genius freaking idea. That's better than the way we're doing it, right? So just kept adapting. And then we kind of locked down what we're doing now, probably, I don't know, would you say like 20 years ago maybe? How long have you been doing it now?
Well, Kobukai, I think, was started probably around, for me, early 2000s. I started in 1996. I have it documented when I started BJJ.
Right.
And then I left BJJ in 98.
Okay, so by the time you joined, it hasn't changed. Like 25 years.
Right. I think, from my recollection, you had just moved some things around. Because I had, when you closed down the Glastonbury building, I still had there's somewhere here, another room, the old charts, and there's a little change from one
probably
to the
for
other.
learning reasons.
Yeah, but nothing, they're essentially the same thing. I think, there was nothing crazy.
No, so that's kind of how and why it developed. Now, Duke Moore, I just want to add this one thing. So this guy, Raymond Duke Moore, so in one style that I learned, right, he is my teacher's teacher's teacher, right? So he started learning in the 1940s. And then kind of went through his entire life, all the way into his 80s when he passed away.
Kyokushin guy, Zenburu. No, he started Zenburu, right?
Zenburu, but he had a black belt in Kyokushin, karate from Masayama, judo from George Yoshida, Daito-ryu from Richard Kim, Shorinji Kempo from Richard Kim. I mean, I don't even remember the list. It was a lot of stuff.
I remember.
He probably just studied alone for just 20 years on so many things before he started kind of putting together his stuff. And his school was called Zen Budokai, but Zen pronounced the same as we think of like Zen and meditation, but if you look at the kanji, it's not the same thing. It means everything. So it's like everything Budo, martial art club, meaning everything I've learned, I've taken the best of everything I've learned and I've put it together into something I think would be great for my students.
No kidding.
So he had this philosophy that basically was, and I think I have it in a letter from him, that it was like, you know, Jiu-Jitsu has lots of different styles, old, new, whatever. The philosophy you need to keep, if it doesn't work, throw it out. Doesn't work anymore, if it's not relevant anymore, don't waste your time on it.
So you would say that's a big influence in like how you started?
Big influence on how I thought about things when I finally got my multiple black belts, and I was just like, there is some stuff that doesn't really work. Let's just not waste our students' time. Let's get them right to the freaking point of self-defense. And then, you know, obviously it expands quite a bit later. But that was kind of the philosophy I followed.
Now, on a training question, so I remember in the charts that you had our jiu-jitsu section. And it'd be some sort of attack, a response, and then it wasn't in the charts, but we typically end in some sort of finish after. Was that something that we call those flows now? That's one of my favorite ways to train. Was that something that came from classical jiu-jitsu, or did you start doing that yourself?
Obviously, it started in classical jiu-jitsu. So any of those things that you would consider would dislocate somebody's bones, right? Your basic arm bar, your Americanas, the Kimuras, all those things. I'm using sort of the American names. I learned them in Japanese, but all of those things are meant to break bones, right? They're in a category in Japanese jiu-jitsu called kensetsu waza. Kensetsu is kind of like bone breaking, right? So they were always there. It's just, did you learn them from one of these old traditional arts where you're just kind of learning them separate from everything?
That's what I was wondering,
or did you learn them from an art that has continued to try to stay relevant, which luckily I did. And so you're learning body movements. You're making these neural pathways that sort of like after this throw or after this takedown or after this move, you can end in this bone breaking technique. And so we teach specific endings along the way, but you know yourself, by the time you started getting to brown belt, I started saying things like, it can be any of those endings.
Just finish,
We just trained your brain to understand the movement. If you want it to be a kneeling armbar, if you want to go into a Jujigatami, or if you want to, spin into a leg lock, whatever. You need structure to learn them, but then you just need to understand where they can happen, and then you get to choose where they can happen.
I think that's a big influence for me in the way I started teaching and then thinking about training myself, is like having these building blocks, almost like you reference points. This XYZ attack gave me this reference, so I can use this throw, which gives me this connection on the ground, which I can use. And I was kind of wondering, did that, was that? I always thought classical jiu-jitsu is like, well, here's the punch defense part, here's the throw part, here's the newaza part, and then you got to learn to figure them out together yourself. I didn't know if you were actually one who had that such a big influence, at least for me, like putting them all together and they got a one flow.
I don't think so. I think most of those flows I actually learned them from my instructors. They were already sort of in the flow, in the flow of things. It's just that as you're coming up and you're trying to pass your test, right, to move on, you're memorizing a certain ending after a certain technique so that you can demonstrate to the people watching you that you know it. But then as you're 3, 4, 5 years in, 6 years in, you can mix and match at will. They're all correct. It's sort of your choice. But we need a methodology to teach someone. What I think we did, and many of the jiu-jitsu styles that still exist that just kept developing, is we put it in the flow when you learn it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like, I've seen some traditional schools that they're teaching, let's say a Jujigatami or your basic arm bar, where you have a guy laying on the floor, you're standing next to them, you lift up their arm, you step over their face, you sit down, and then that's all they teach you.
Right.
Right? Well, that's day one of learning an arm bar, right? And then day two, we're already moving into something else.
Right.
And by the time you're there a month, you're pulling it out of thin air. And,
Yeah.
So are they both teaching Jujigatami or armbar? They are, but one is very focused on a practical application, and the other one is just focused on preserving the technique, right? Historically, and those are the ones that I think get the bad rap, right? Because we're very focused today on application.
Yes.
Really being able to use it in all those versatile things that I've talked about, and then you look back at these Koryu styles, and you're like nobody's going to wait for you to do that technique, but we forget sometimes that isn't their purpose. They're not worried about the self-defense. They're trying to preserve this long lineage of things, right? Don't forget, you've got senseis and stuff in Japan that are like the 34th inheritor of a technique from the 1600s. So their job is to preserve this family tradition.
Oh shit.
Not to necessarily make sure their guys can go into a tournament or do whatever. They have a very different purpose. So we can legitimately say what they're doing may not be applicable to self-defense. But what we can't say is what they're doing is wrong, because what they're doing, the purpose of what they're doing, is something very different than practical application.
I love that, yeah. So then that makes the question, why is Aikido bullshit?
Well, Aikido gets a bad rap.
It does.
Aikido gets a bad rap.
I'm joking, but at the same time.
So think of Aikido and Judo kind of in the same boat, and here's why. They had the same life cycle. Both of the founders of those arts were jujitsu people, right? One was focused a little bit more on that battlefield jujitsu, rough and tough, rough and tumble, lots of throws, that kind of thing. And one was a little bit more in the aikijitsu realm, right? Although there was some crossover. And so they took different paths, right? One of them said, I want to do this in a practical way, and the only way I can see of doing that in Japan right now, with all the laws against self-defense and all that stuff, is to put it into the school system and make an educational requirement, and then make it a sport. If I can do that, change it enough to make it safe-ish, right, I can continue this tradition.
So those laws on self-defense, they basically, that prohibit jujitsu being trained, essentially?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of it went into hiding.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the Koryu style that's just preserving. And then we had the Judo versions. We had some that stayed relevant, but a lot of them left. That's why I said they went to Australia, Europe, United States at the turn of the 20th century. Aikijitsu, kind of a very similar thing. If you can see videos or read books about the beginning of Aikido with Ueshiba, killer stuff. They called his first dojo Jikogu Dojo, which is the Hell Dojo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was just people were getting injured, and nobody could survive class. Then a war came along between China and Japan. He was in it. He got captured as a prisoner. He really got sort of disillusioned with humans. Why are we fucking killing each other like this? He linked up with this guy who was sort of a religious leader from a religious sect called a Motokyo, and he really got religion, right? She got religion. So he's so how do I take this art that I've practiced my whole life, not just throw it out because it's violent? How do I turn it into something that we can still do, but the philosophy isn't violence, the philosophy is cooperation.
Yeah, interesting.
And so that's why Aikido people to this day, right, that real significant change that probably came in the 1930s, 1940s, is how do we flow together? Right? We're still using these old ancient Aikijitsu techniques, but all we really want to do is, you're doing your part, I'm doing my part, we're going to flow, we're going to throw, and we're going to take that combat set of techniques and we're going to use it for a completely different reason.
Very interesting.
Those are reflected in the Japanese martial arts by a word that ends in do. Judo, Aikido, it means a way. And what it's really saying is we're using a combat methodology as a way for a very different philosophy. Karate Do. It's using a fighting art for a philosophical reason.
No shit.
Yeah, whereas you'll see things like Jiu-Jitsu, Aiki-Jitsu. When we have the Jitsu at the end, we're talking about a military science. Right, we're talking about a Bujitsu, a military science, and that's why they're more focused and more real about application, taking those ancient Koryu out of the picture, right? Yeah.
My vocab sucks.
So back to why does Aikido suck? So Aikido, again, has its own purpose, which I just described what the purpose is. Can it be used for self-defense? Absolutely. I have seen a couple of people, really amazing instructors that, like, you don't want to take their Aiki techniques. They're so close to our Aiki techniques for the way it came down. Like, you're going to break your arm, you're going to land on your head, you're not going to escape from their Ariminagi. Right. They're going to crush you. But that's not how they teach their class. Right? They teach their class with the philosophy of Do, just the way, but them in particular. Like, I've known great Aikido people that have actually been kicked out of the Aikido Association, of the Aikikai from Japan, because they were too fucking hardcore.
Really?
And they were just crushing people, and they were just like, this is not what we do. But they were awesome at Aikido, very close to Aiki-Jitsu.
Yeah.
But
are there any like pure Aiki-Jitsu schools around?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, there's probably 5 well-known ones in the world that are all the top students of like Sokaku Takeda.
Yeah.
The guy who invented Aikido was a student of Sokaku Takeda. He just took a different path. And they're doing Daito-ryu. I've witnessed quite a bit of it. I've trained in some of it. It's, in my opinion, there are still portions of that curriculum that feel very Koryu, very preserving the techniques. And then there's other parts of it that are like legitimately badass. So yeah, that still does exist.
What's your favorite aspect of jiu-jitsu to train? Like now, like, well, you're in the 50s now? I'm joking. But
I wish.
You look like it. But we always make a joke with Shihan, I've known you for 25 plus years, and I swear to God, you look the same as the day I met you. But good genes. Like what? So now being a little older, and now probably teaching and sharing. Like, what is like your favorite thing to? I love throwing. Like mine, I love tossing people. You give me. I can throw someone in a Hilaire and Uchimata. I'm having a great day. And it's just love. Air time makes me happy.
Yeah.
What about like what's your kind of favorite aspect of jiu-jitsu?
So because I am as an individual just so focused on the self-defense piece of it, throwing for sure, because if you throw somebody, and I'm not even talking about like a takedown where it's like a reversal or something, I'm talking about like a genuine throw, most people aren't getting up because there's no mats out there in the real world, and they just don't get up. So that's kind of the end of the fight. And then, as you know, as you progress, you go from a safer version of a throw to the real version, where the person isn't supposed to like land on their side like a judo person. They're like on the top of their head, right? So throwing for sure, some of my favorite stuff. Love Uchimata, Hirai Goshis, Ippon Seoi or drop Ippon Seois. I mean, I just love that kind of stuff. So that's definitely a favorite piece of mine. Weapon defense by far.
Oh, that's right,
I would say that weapon defense is my number 1.
Okay.
Throw is probably my second, and Aiki is my third.
Okay.
But Aiki and weapon defense are so, well actually, weapon defense is in the middle, right? It's got a component of throws and it's got a component of Aiki.
True.
But I like the feeling of going hard and fast with this attitude of like, this is life and death at this very moment.
Right.
Whereas if an unarmed person like, starts grabbing onto me, I can toss them down pretty easily, and it's pretty much over with.
Right.
Somebody puts a gun in my face, in the back of my head, that's a whole different feeling. And then the Aiki-Jitsu stuff is just, there's 2 pieces of it for me. Number 1, it's so insanely painful. Like, you can take a giant person and put them on their knee in a second.
Drop the right grip.
And then the second part is, when you learn Aiki-Jitsu, at least this is what I experienced, and I've heard it from some students, you're like, this is great, and it's really painful, but like, when am I ever going to really be able to
I probably said that like 10, 15 years ago.
I said it a million times. When am I ever going to pull this off in self-defense? Like, I'm not getting that immediate reward where I'm rolling around on the ground and I catch somebody in an arm bar from guard, and like, I get that, I see it works. And it didn't take me that long to learn it, whereas Aiki-Jitsu takes a long time to really learn it. I can show you the moves and you can get it, but you don't
the
get it.
sensitivity and the feeling of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like it took me after my black belt and years of not like. I gave Aikido credit and I trained it, but it wasn't. Excuse me. I'm sorry. It wasn't my favorite thing,
Yeah.
But as I got older, I definitely saw the more the value and benefit of it, and I started geeking out, and I find it very interesting.
Yeah. So I love the subtlety of it, where it just looks like it shouldn't work.
Right.
And then when you feel it, you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
The other thing too, it's a progression, right? So in Aikijitsu, you're learning your kotegaeshi and your ikajos and your nikajos and all that stuff as you're coming up. But it's not until you get later do we start putting the strikes in there that actually belong in there, right?
Yeah.
And then it's not until even later, well after black belt, that we basically tell you like, these are all battlefield combat weapon against weapon techniques, right? And then your eyes are just like, I didn't even literally know what I was doing. But I can't show you that at the beginning. It's too complex, right? So those would be my 3 favorite. Weapon defense, throwing, Aikijitsu for sure.
We get a lot of, anytime I put anything knife-related weapons defense, there's some always commenter out there saying how this sucks, this is stupid. Why, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what is it about the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu approach to weapons combat that makes you feel like it's so powerful? Like, why do you feel like it's, I don't want to call it the best thing for weapons defense because it's probably not one true thing, but like, what is it about the Aikijitsu approach for weapons combat that gives you confidence? Let's call it that.
So, great question, because there's like a couple layers to that answer. So first of all, the weapon defense that I taught you is a mix of things. It's not just from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. It's a mix of stuff that I got obviously from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu for sure. There's some stuff from Krav Maga in there. There's definitely a ton of stuff from military combatives in there. And then onesie-twosie things that I've learned from people along the way, regardless of what their art was, that I was just like, holy crap, like that is amazing. I need to get in there because it makes sense. So that's kind of the way I was teaching it. Where we say it has an alignment with, some of it has an alignment with Aikijitsu is like, people have a knife in their hand, right? So you need to have control of the arm in some way. And so you're bending wrists, elbows.
What is you have a mantra, and I don't want to put it on camera before I forget it. Control the weapon, control the arm, control the body. Okay.
Yeah.
I remembered it, right?
You did.
All right.
You did.
I'm sorry. Pass my black.
I'm not surprised. Which is like a little different from when it's unarmed, right? Because the first thing you want to do in the unarmed is control the body, right? Position before submission. Sure. Right? But you got to get a hold of the weapon if it's a knife. I don't mean hold the weapon, but you have to have control of that arm, right? If it's a gun, if it's a pistol, that's a whole other thing, right? Because the first thing is to remove the target, right? You got to get the target out of the way, which is you. And then that's the extra step before the other ones. But that is definitely the mantra. What I suggest for people that are interested in knife defense is don't go out and look for knife defense techniques. Go out there and look for videos of knife attacks.
I remember you and I don't mind going back a long time ago. I think we
exchanged a ton of videos.
And I looked through some old hard drives to find that, because I remember there was a plethora of just...
heinous knife attacks.
Yes, like heinous, but you got a real good understanding where that knife was coming, what types of behaviors people were doing.
If you as a martial artist don't have a lot of knife defense techniques and you're interested in something like that, my suggestion is definitely look up videos of knife attacks. Because if you go for the technique first, you're learning it out of context.
Right.
You've got to understand what it is you're defending against, and a lot of time knife defense it's just too stylized. Now I get it. On week one, we got to walk through the steps.
Slow it down a little bit.
Gotta slow it down, but it has to be based in reality. If your instructor does not know what they're talking about, anything's going to look good to a student.
True.
They're like, oh, that's fucking amazing. That's like, I could never do that. But that doesn't mean it's valid.
Right.
Could be complete garbage. So look at the attacks, then look at the available defenses that maybe your instructor or however you're learning give you, and say, do those two make sense together? or am I going to get freaking killed?
Right, right.
And if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't matter how cool that defense looks.
Gone.
Chuck it.
What I liked about, you did it last night too, and we did this all throughout training with you, is that you always mix in some sort of like live component to it. Like first last night, you had someone have the knife in the hand, the other person started the 2-on-1 grip, and I stab you and you don't get stabbed, and switch hands and all that. And we also do stuff like that all the time, where they're pulling out and going after you. And I think, at least from my experience, it was a really great way to train, because it wasn't just not necessarily about the technique anymore.
Right.
It was more about like the overall principles of knife combat or defense, that it's instinctual, it's wild, it's crazy, and then you have the opportunity to use whatever technique, Udigatami or whatever you're in,
right,
because somehow that weapon defense brought you right there. No, there's a break. You know what I mean? I feel like that's at least how I learned it. Like, you gave me these different techniques, these different things to use, but then when it went live and we were playing, I wasn't thinking about, I'm going to use this technique now, or this. It was just because I was in that reference point for somehow that arm over there, and I was able to do this. And
exactly.
Really, I think it was really fun.
You don't get to do a knife defense technique if you don't stop yourself from getting stabbed.
Right.
If you get stabbed, even if it's not a fatal stab, really quickly right after that, your body's going to go into shock. You're going to lose all your strength, your ability.
Oh my God.
So you've got to control that, and you've got to know what that feels like without the martial art technique.
Yeah.
Right? Just hold on to somebody with a knife in their hand, or just start out holding it and let them try to stab you, and you just work on keeping that away from you. And then you start getting the feeling of what it might be like.
Right.
Once you're understanding those dynamics, yes, we can turn them into techniques, just like you're saying. But just, teaching somebody that somebody's going to stab you and you're going to block it out of the way and then hit them in the face and then you're totally dead. You have no idea what you're talking about.
I think it's why people when I do show videos like online, I think that's why people give me shit. It's like they're seeing that. They're seeing this step-by-step process of defending it, but in reality, they're just ideas, and the real knife training or defense happens like what we did last night, where you're understanding I shouldn't say the real part of your knife training has to have, like you said, that live component. Yeah, and kind of in finishing with the knife combat, I think for me, one of the big takeaways from this conversation is that, not just knife defense, weapons defense in general is a big hairy demon. Yeah. And there's almost, what I'm trying to take from this is that there's two ways you need to train it. And one is you need to learn some basic concepts or techniques, martial arts, basic techniques, where it comes from Jiu-Jitsu, Krav, something, whatever, that gives you a solution or an opportunity, right? And then you also have to then have some sort of live component where you are testing against that gun to your back, that knife threat, and someone pushing you, blah, blah, blah,
absolutely.
blah. That if you don't have those two together, it falls apart. It's kind of funny though. There's this video, maybe I'll show it to you later if I can find it. It was a combative school, and they were training knife defense, and it was like the guy had the helmet on and all this type of thing, and I always found it so stupid because the guy was almost like forced to wait to receive a knife attack and then respond. It was almost like the timing was off. You missed the first part, it's fucking charging you. Within 9 years, waiting. Is it my time to defend yet? It was just I found this so stupid, but they're trying to prove a point. How hard.
Well, that was exactly what I was talking about last night, right? One of the first things I said is talking about the person taking out the knife, and I'm like, if he's standing 5 feet away from you, it is not time to do jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Just did him out of there, man. People forget that component.
Yeah.
Right. If you're talking about pure self-defense.
Right.
Not engaging is an excellent technique, right? Is
absolutely
getting out of there. You train in martial arts, so something in your head wants to do it. But you've got to realize that now we're talking about your actual life,
right?
Not your dojo life.
Right.
When you lose in class, you tap out. When you lose out there, you're in the hospital or you're dead. Right. So that's a really important component. I even do that with newaza, so rolling, groundwork. I'll put somebody on their back, put somebody in mount, and I'll say your goal is to escape each other. but your other goal is to make sure the other person can't escape you, right? Because that's what actually is going to happen in a fight. I'm not rolling around in a parking lot and shit with somebody just because I know how to.
Right.
My first thing is like maybe reverse and get up and like create a distance or whatever. I mean, like that, you know. So that's a good exercise to do because it'll change this little piece of somebody's mind that says, oh like that's an option too that I was not really thinking about.
We talk about ground combat here, and it says I am the two will say Oz and I compared against each other, and Kenny's probably on his own little thing, but I'm probably more stand-up related, Oz is more ground related. Mm-hmm. And because I tend to work with more of the MMA guys, you know, my first rule of thumb is get the fuck off the ground. Like, like I don't really play guard anymore. I like guard to a certain degree, and I teach it, but in reality, my guard has become takedown guard. Get up higher than my opponent, and then fucking take him down from my
reversal.
Yeah, basically reversal. You know, I'm gonna get on a guard, do a technical stand up, and get on your head right after. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna.
Sure.
You know, like it's a little different. Or I wrestle from guard now. If I'm at the bottom, you're standing up. I'm just gonna grab a leg and wrestle up and take you down that way.
Sure.
You know, so it's a little. My philosophy on that has changed a little bit. But I forgot where I was going with that. The escaping first concept. So when first, you know, I always say the first most important move of jiu-jitsu is the technical stand-up, how to get the fuck off the ground.
Get out of there.
You're on your back, someone's what means to do you harm, create space, get to your feet. Cool thing I think is that when you learn that good technical stand-up, those concepts, getting back to your feet, avoiding the ground, you also start building more stronger jiu-jitsu skill set. Because in that movement pattern, then the concepts within it, I don't have to be down there.
No.
You know, I am not for you see some of these new students, like they think they have to be in guard and they have to play this, and all of a sudden they're trying to play guard, there's someone's now smashing with side control and all that, and they're having a hard night. I'm like, well, bro, you chose to be there. You don't have to be there.
That's where you need that clear delineation between what is it you're practicing right now.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got guard, where you're going to do a quick reversal and you're up and you're separating, right? Very self-defense focused. You've got guard armbar in a grappling competition.
Right.
And you have literally the exact same move if somebody is in your guard and they've got a knife at your throat.
Right.
Literally the same thing, right? You're going to hip him a little bit to pull that thing away, and you're going to spin under, and you're going to break his freaking arm, right? There's another practical application. So knowing what you're doing on the ground is absolutely important, because you may end up there for sure.
Yeah.
But it is not the goal.
Right.
We've talked about that whole progression of self-defense, which is, number one, just the awareness. That's a problem, I'm not going over there.
Right.
Number two, you find yourself in it, get out.
Right.
Number three, somebody puts your hands on you, mechanically escape. If the mechanical escape doesn't work, you strike them and escape. If the strike doesn't work, you throw them and escape. And if all that shit went wrong and you end up on the ground, you need to know what you're doing. But where that place is in that list is at the end, not at the beginning.
Right.
That's a self-defense focus.
Right.
If you're a sport grappler or whatever, obviously that's a completely different view. They're all valid, just don't get them confused. They are separate ways to use jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And as we just talked briefly, it's like you asked me, like, well, what is the things that you know, I may disagreed with you over the years? And I never disagreed with anything. I always obviously loved everything you did. But one of the things I always wondered about is how come we didn't include like more guard work, like half guard, or more of a seat. You know, like I have in our Tritex called combative guard. There's closed guard, scissor guard, half guard, and butterfly. Because those are 4 guards that everybody will be in to a certain degree at some point in time. And you have to know first, you have to know how to get up out of all of them, and then quick transitions out. You know, so like what?
So off the top of my head, I really don't know the number. I feel like we had about 15-ish guard.
Yeah, I mean, I remember closed guard, scissor guard type approach.
Yeah,
a little bit of butterfly.
Yeah. We had submissions from the guard, right? We had a bunch of those, and we had some escapes from the guard.
Yeah.
But everything self-defense focused. Right? There is plenty more guard. But now you've moved from like the necessity of self-defense into the game of jiu-jitsu. Right? And now we're half guard. Half guard has so many cool things that you can do from it.
Yeah, it's a system within itself.
But it's like on purpose.
Yes.
There's no on purpose in a fight. Right? It's just whatever shit's happening right now. And most of it can be taken care of with this group of stuff.
Right.
I feel like if I was in a fight and somebody started playing half guard, I'd stop and be like, "Oh, dude, what school do you go to?" Because it's not that it's not a good technique. It's a good technique in the place it belongs.
Well, we use it, talk about it, because out of all the guards, somehow eventually you're gonna end up in a half guard, one leg in, one leg out, whether flattened out on an knee shield or etc. So this is going back like now, like looking at now, but we put it as an essential system because no matter what, someone is gonna be there.
Sure, and if you're in the self-defense,
it was a little bit also. I am taking it from just so I'm not, I didn't mean to interrupt you. When I am teaching my students here, I am thinking along like basically 3 lines: sport, street, and survival. So like I am playing the sport game a little bit, but I'm also thinking about, okay, this is for self-defense and street combat, and this is, okay, what happens if he does have a knife or a gun, what's going to change?
So that's exactly where I was going to go. So I'm glad you did that, right? If you're thinking about what we call a half guard today, which is really a position that just kind of ends up happening,
right?
Self-defense situation, probably 90% of the time, you're going to do some kind of reversal to get on top or to escape. Right. Now, there's plenty of other things to do, right? You can do, knee bars and calf slicers. I mean, there's like a million things you can do. But you shouldn't if you're doing self-defense.
Right.
So, if it comes up, that's great. When you're bringing somebody from, say, a white belt to a black belt, and not every jiu-jitsu system has a belt system, but from a novice to an experienced person, you have to fill that gap with whatever is necessary for that end goal, right? So if an advanced person in a sport needs to have this stuff under their belt, that's going to kind of be how you form your curriculum. If that end result is a self-defense person, you've got to have this curriculum, and you can't waste any time playing around. Playing around can come after that. But you've got to get them from here to there with the stuff that works all the time. And then you can play forever, right? Because you're doing 4, 5, 6 years, and then you've got a lifetime of stuff to play around with, right? So it just depends on what that end goal is.
I think that goes back to how I always viewed Cobra Kai as that like cornerstone heart. That you gave us the freedom to. Well, you gave us, as you said, you gave us everything we needed to defend ourselves. There's no bullshit in that curriculum, and I use that curriculum as the like. Not the root, but like the core,
The core,
And then I like you not gave us permission, but you encouraged us to explore BJJ, judo, whatever, combatives, MMA. You just didn't give a shit because you're like, that's what you're supposed to do. Like you're like, that's
And the only difference, I think, the way that we did it, which goes kind of back to a question you had at the very beginning about traditional jiu-jitsu, right? And putting that into the right buckets, one being that Koryu that just preserves techniques historically, the other one still being a traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. In other words, teaching in an environment of tradition, but still allowing the techniques themselves to adapt to whatever is needed.
Is that how you describe what we did? You would say, like, I feel like we had I don't want to call it.
We had a modern jiu-jitsu style in a traditional environment, right? Because it was important to me to preserve those non-technical traditions. I find value in them. I find that it changes the way people think, the way they apply discipline to themselves, their expectations of students when they become teachers, right? It has that other component. So my curriculum did not allow you to explore while you went from white to black belt. Then highly encouraged after that. The world is a little bit different now, right? Sure, some of that still exists, and some people still train that way, and that's absolutely fine, right? That's sort of up to their traditions. But there's also the world now where people train in multiple dojos under multiple instructors, and that's accepted now, right? When I was coming up, I mean, I'm probably talking to people that weren't born when I started. I started in 1980, right? So it's like, that was just the way it was done, regardless of how the techniques were being done. The environment was that way. But now it's different, and that's fine because jiu-jitsu will adapt. It doesn't mean you don't learn the techniques the right way just because you don't have a traditional environment. You don't have a strict traditional environment here at Tritech. However, your ethos, when I look at yourself, I look at Oz, your personal countenance, right? Your leadership style, your instruction style, what you demand from your students, what you see as acceptable, like from your students, both technically and personally, still has a core in tradition.
Absolutely. Oz and I talk about that a lot. We wanted to keep that.
And that's not just a Japanese tradition, by the way. It is because we do a Japanese martial art of the warrior, of warriors. It is a warrior ethos. You will find those same attitudes in modern military units, right?
Sure.
So that was just happened to be the Japanese military unit,
right?
But you will find that in all the military. It's a very specific attitude of hierarchy, of discipline, of expectation, of results.
Results.
Yeah, so just because you don't necessarily on what specific day wear a gi or bow to a kamiza or whatever, does not mean you're still not operating with that warrior mentality.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that to me is actually very like internally is very, very important to me. Is like, you know, when sometimes we see the new or my young ones, like they just do stupid shit or don't understand it. Oz and I will have our own little like, what the fuck these guys are doing? You know, they don't fucking know. And then they get a mat lecture at the end of the night. But about that stuff, I'll reference our old dojo and reference like how it should be, how it was for us, and how important it is for us to keep that ethos here. That even when people walk in the door, we have even they're fitness oriented, we say we have a strong martial arts ethos of our discipline, respect for each other, working hard. You know that when you come here, you're on a mission. It's not just a little fuck around. Like you're here to achieve something for yourself and become better.
And there's a reason for that, right? Yeah. I'm thinking about the instructors here at this dojo, but all legitimate instructors probably in this group, right? They are dangerous people.
Agreed.
I mean, you're a great person, right? I mean, I just love hanging out with you. You're like the friendliest guy. I try to be that way. But behind that, there's a really, really dangerous person that if you go past the line,
right,
it's a problem, right?
Yes.
And so now we've got dangerous people teaching other people to become dangerous people. And that demands an ethos, a discipline, a hierarchy, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, very well said.
Otherwise, it just becomes a dangerous mayhem, right?
Yeah.
A free-for-all of egos, of, disrespect, or whatever. And that is not a warrior mindset, regardless of you're talking traditional Japanese or anything else.
Right. That
has to exist, or it's really not going to pass that knowledge on in not only a legitimate way, but a responsible way. I don't want to see some guy who in regular life I would consider to be a complete asshole and give him a bunch of dangerous killing techniques.
Right.
That's just insane.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So even if they come in and start that way, some people will find the path. Mm-hmm. Other people won't. And if you're teaching right, if you're running your school the right way, they'll leave.
Oh yeah.
It's too much for their ego. Yeah. They'll weed themselves out. Occasionally you have to help someone be weeded out. But in general, if you've got the right attitude in your place, whatever that place looks like, they'll leave.
Yeah, that thankfully has been our experience here. Every now and then I have to actually kick someone out. I say once or twice a year. I have to do that. But not often enough where it actually like hurts the community. In fact, it's almost the exact opposite when I do remove the cancer. And it's let's say a sad story, but I had probably one of the best fighters I've ever had here. Coached him, you know, he had a few fights here. He's like, oh my God, this kid is something truly special. But he's also a little fucked in the head, and we've helped this person on so many different ways and so many different levels. And then finally he disrespected a girl here, and I was like, you're done. I just can't handle you anymore. And it was too bad, because when you think about it, like there's Custom Models book over there, and he talked about, we found Tyson. He was actually looking for the people who had been through some shit and had a chip on their shoulder. And this student reminded me of that type of person where he had this edge to him that was dangerous, and I believe in his heart of hearts he was a good kid, but he had problems with substances and alcohol especially, and he just did fucking stupid decisions and just made it. But I eventually had to ask him to leave, but it was a hard moment for me, because wow, it's like at the same time I kind of giving up someone who I thought was really special, maybe could have helped my career, maybe, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like the martial arts ethos was more important to me. The community was more important to me.
Absolutely.
And by doing so,
it's a tough decision, but you got to do it sometimes.
And by doing so, I was actually proud of myself. I'll say it. It's like it strengthened the community. The community saw me as a better leader. I think that they looked at like, okay, Matt will protect us, even if not in martial arts to protect us, the community and what we're all trying to do together was.
When I think of that, right? I was talking before about that problem student that comes in and finds a path for themselves.
You want that to happen to everybody.
Including myself and probably all of the instructors. We all came in with some kind of chip on our shoulder or some kind of baggage or some kind of way of
kicked out of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Thinking we were badasses in some way or whatever. Everybody's got something that they came in with. And if you if you finally just let go and gave yourself to the art and trusted your instructor because you've done enough research and you've seen enough to realize they're legitimate, right? It can change a person 100%. You can be a person with anxiety and with anger issues and all of that, and if you just give yourself to it, over time you can become a very, very different person that now helps other people also take that path. But you've also seen people walk in the dojo that no matter what we did, they just weren't willing to give in, and they wouldn't allow themselves to change, and eventually they just were gone, or we had to make them gone. So it's up to the individual and their personal heart inside that has just that little tickling thing in them that says, there's something wrong with me that I really want to fix, and this might be the path. Right. I'm going to give it a chance. I'm not going to just ego my way through this. I'm not going to strength my way through this. I'm not going to say, but I already know all these other martial arts. I'm just going to open my mind, leave my ego at the door, and I'm going to see how it goes. I wish people would try to do that more often. And thankfully, I think most people who hear and Cobra Kai do have that ethos, and it almost breaks my heart when it's the other way. Because I do want to see, and at least I try to see the good in everybody. I believe in everybody. There is that good person trying to come out, and I do believe martial arts is one of the best ways to help bring that out of someone. 100%.
But it works 90% of the time, and then 10% of the time you got to deal with the fuckers.
I look at it this way: if you save one person, you've done something great for the universe, literally. And then we have the opportunity to maybe help many, many people, and we don't know what that help is. It doesn't mean they get to black belt, or it could be something that's short term. Maybe they needed a year to straighten out whatever their issue is, right? I've seen many people come and go, not for a bad reason. It was just enough for them. Whatever it is they needed, they got.
They got, and they moved on. You said a quote for me, I don't know when you said it to me, but it stuck with me for a very, very long time. That, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but you're talking about being a ripple in the pond. That, that you wanted to be that, for the people that this ripple that you created was somehow affecting, the way I look at it, that ripple is like me affecting the universe, that I'm by my rock or my splash or whatever, that I am providing some sort of, and I think that's you've done that. I'm one of your ripples along the way. And,
let me tell you how I know that's a real thing, right? I was always told it by my instructors. I had great instructors, but it's one of those things you have to feel and learn and see for yourself. You can have the intellectual knowledge, but that's not the same as the real experience. Is anytime I walk into your dojo or Jake's dojo or Chris's dojo, there's people there I don't know.
Right.
They're a ripple past you.
I know, right?
There are two ripples past me. There's 6 ripples past Duke Moore, right?
Right.
It just keeps going, and that's just such an awesome feeling, because I know you're impacting someone's life the way that I had the privilege to do for you, the way that someone else had the privilege to give to me, and I had the privilege to receive. And it's an amazing feeling. It's powerful. It transcends you. You start to become, later, it takes a while, right? When you get to the point you're I'm kind of getting this now, right? And you can even let go of the last bit of ego that's in there. You start realizing the real meaning of this. This is a many generational thing that you were lucky enough to be a little vessel of.
First, I want to thank you for being an excellent ripple in my pond.
Thank you.
You've been a tremendous influence in my life.
And thanks for carrying it on.
I'm just very, very thankful to have found you and had the time to train with you, and have be a mentor, friend, and all that. So, lastly, what would you recommend for someone who, we have this question happen a lot, people want to experience Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, they want to experience Cobra Kai Jiu-Jitsu, they want to experience something that we've gone through, but maybe they live in bumfuck Alaska, and like, how would you suggest someone who wants to, and this is a big question, there's really no answer, I'm not really sure how, maybe, because I haven't found the answer to this yet, so maybe going to you, like, what is the, and it's not buying an online course, and it's not, like, where do you,
it's so tough because it's such a personal experience.
Yeah.
Right? It would be hard to learn sort of the techniques unless you were already a very experienced martial artist. Like maybe you were already a black belt in jiu-jitsu and you want to pick up something else. Yeah, you could probably take some stuff from video, right? And you have your practice partners in a safe environment on mats, and you could probably do it. But if you're just like sort of a new person or a person doing a different martial art, it's just difficult because so much of it is that person to person. Yeah. How many times, like just as a student, do I have to come over and like literally reposition your hand?
I know, yeah.
Or do it on you so you feel it?
Yep.
Because there's no words that can explain it, right? All of a sudden you get it done to you and you're like, oh, okay, all right, and then you go do it. I don't know if that's doable outside of a personal experience. Now, that's what makes the martial arts, a real martial art, special, is that you have to go do it. Yeah. Right? Yeah, I wish it was all over the world, but the nature of self-defense arts are it's a small thing in the world. It is.
We're talking 1% of the less than 1% of the world, right?
Sure, we're in the martial art world. We think everybody loves to do it, but really that's not the reality of it.
Crazy. Yeah.
So I always encourage people to find some place that's legitimate. Go and watch a class. Watch 2 classes. Ask if you can try one. Yeah. Does the way you're getting taught, does it make sense? Is it a building block approach? Is everybody personable and willing to work with you, or do they just want to prove how good they are and just want to kick your ass? Or are there secret techniques, right? Or like the only all that kind of stuff is like red flags. Right. And it doesn't matter the martial art. You're always looking for that. You're looking for somebody with a legitimate history from their instructors. Some kind of curriculum, whether it's written down or it's in their head, that kind of moves you from here to there. Once you've learned the techniques, doing it the way you said, right, live. It has to have a live component where the other person does not want you to do that for them. Right. And that has to morph through time, right? At the beginning, it's a little bit, somewhat cooperative, and later, it has to have that component. And there also has to be something in your head that isn't constantly going, that doesn't make any sense. That's ridiculous. Yeah, right. Everybody has 1 or 2 of those things along the way. But when it starts to be like a lot of it, you're probably in the wrong spot. And you're in the wrong spot.
So to kind of paraphrase it, and I like this answer, that it doesn't necessarily matter the martial art. It doesn't matter it matters if what they're doing is serving the purpose of, like, say, self-defense, because that's what I think most of the people are listening are really on that self-defense side. That could be karate, taekwondo, hapki, doesn't matter what the fuck it is. Right. That if someone does have that system in place, that curriculum, he or she has experience and the mindset and the ability to take you from point A to point B in your training, that there's thousands of martial arts schools out there that could be good for people. You just gotta, and when I found you, I went to, I won't say people's names, but I had gone to other martial arts schools, many of them, and then I visited a bunch of other schools before I finally found your website and visited yours. And I tell a story all the time. First night I walked in, I see, you're teaching awesome techniques, and I see Kenny and Scuba Steve rolling. I'm like, what the fuck? Those guys are white belts. You choked me out with a triangle choke, and I'm like, what the fuck did I just walk into? Yeah. Sign me up now.
But at the same time, right? Not abusive.
No, you guys are great. Yeah.
And one of the things, I know one of the instructors you're thinking about,
extremely abusive.
Well, no, it's the instructor that wants to show you how good he is. Versus the instructor that's only focused on making you better than he is.
And you talk about that all the time. And that's probably the best.
Huge difference, right? You can be amazed at what that person's doing, but slowly you're going to realize, oh, this is all about him, right? When you get into the place where you realize, oh, it's all about me, like all they're caring about is that I'm getting better, then you're probably in the right place. And you did combined with those other things that I was talking about.
But no, you did. I remember you tell that. So I think day one you walking into that dojo, you always talk, my job is to make you better than me. Yep. And I've kept that in my own heart from these guys, and it's already happened. Some of these guys are like, I didn't know what jiu-jitsu you're doing anymore. This is too good. Like, I have a purple belt right now. He's just a stud. He wrote like papers out on stuff. I'm like, you're okay. Good for you.
You're amazing. Yeah. That's a great feeling, isn't it?
It is. Yeah,
it's a great feeling. Yeah, that in everything, martial arts and everything else, whoever is your instructor, your mentor, could be in business or whatever, they're good if they're concerned that you're going to be great.
Yeah.
Not that you're competition to them in any way. They're so secure with themselves that all they want you to be is great like them and have the wonderful experiences that they had. That's like their main focus. And they give you everything.
Yeah.
They hide nothing. Like that's the dojo you want to be in, or the facility you want to be in.
Well, thankfully I found yours. So, all right, let's leave it there. Thank you, Shihan. Guys, this has been an interesting podcast, and hopefully you got a lot working with or learning from Shihan Russ. I've had a pleasure talking to you today.
You too, Matt.
And hopefully see you later tonight. We'll see what happens.
All right, sounds great.
Thanks.
Thank you, man.